All right, everyone, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling BRICS.
BRICS, yeah. It's a big one, lots to unpack.
We've got the Wikipedia article pulled up, ready to go deep.
Beyond the headlines, beyond the hype, what's the real deal with this potential new world order?
And, most importantly, why should you, the listener, even care? We'll break it all down for you.
What's really interesting about BRICS is that it reflects this changing dynamic globally.
Right, like, the power isn't just in one place anymore.
For ages, it was the G7 kind of running the show,
yeah.
right? Calling the shots. But now...
We've got new players on the field.
Exactly. These major economies, some, doing better than others, but still...
They're banding together.
And it's not necessarily about, friendship or anything. It's more strategic, I think.
Yeah, more like, hey, together we actually have a lot of leverage.
Right? Having a louder voice on that global stage, pushing back a bit against the West's dominance.
Okay, so for anyone just tuning in, BRICS, it stands for.
Brazil, Russia, India, China.
And South Africa jumped in a bit later.
Hey, the acronym even catchier, right?
Seriously, though, that acronym BRICS, it just rolls off the tongue. Someone had to have planned that.
You'd be surprised. It was actually coined by, get this, an economist at Goldman Sachs.
No way, really?
Yep. He was looking at, investment trends, not some grand political alliance.
Shows you how these things can take on a life of their own.
Absolutely. How economic potential can translate into serious geopolitical weight.
So they started with this economic idea, but now they're aiming to change the whole power structure.
Trying to, at least.
And now they've added even more countries. The Wikipedia article lists Iran, the UAE, Egypt.
Don't forget Ethiopia.
Oh, right. And there was all that buzz about Saudi Arabia getting an invitation.
Still haven't decided if they're in or out. Playing it cool.
So we've got this really diverse group now. How does that impact BRICS's goals? Is it helpful or...
It's a mixed bag, to be honest. On the one hand, that diversity. It gives them more weight.
More voices, more perspectives.
That's more people, more resources under their control. A huge chunk of the world's population.
Yeah, suddenly they're a force to be reckoned with.
Exactly. But, and this is a big but,
getting everyone on the same page has got to be tough.
Oh, for sure. Getting that many countries to agree on, well, anything. Monumental task.
Let alone trying to challenge the existing world order.
Yeah, that's the real hurdle.
So where do they even start? The Wikipedia article mentioned a BRICS development bank.
Ah, the BRICS Bank.
Is that like a real thing or just symbolic?
Oh, it's real. Very real. They're challenging the IMF, the World Bank, all those established institutions.
Wow. Bold move.
It is. And they're actually funding projects, mostly infrastructure development, roads, bridges, that kind of thing.
Interesting. And the article mentioned they're focusing on developing countries, right?
Right. Providing an alternative to, let's say, the traditional lenders.
Okay, so they're putting their money where their mouth is. But the big one, the one that really caught my eye in this article, they're talking about a new global reserve currency.
Yeah, that's the big one, isn't it? The idea that the U.S. dollar wouldn't be the kind of default anymore.
It's huge.
Game changer if they can pull it off.
Can they?
Well, that's what we need to figure out.
So a new global reserve currency. Break that down for me. What does that even mean?
Okay, so think of it like this. Right now, the U.S. dollar, it's like the king of currencies, right?
King dollar.
Exactly. Countries all over the world, they hold U.S. dollars in their reserves. It's what's used for international trade, oil, big transactions, that sort of thing.
So if another currency were to become as powerful as the dollar, that's a big deal.
Huge. It would be a massive shift in the global financial system. And that's what BRICS wants to do, create their own reserve currency to rival the dollar.
Wow. But why? What's the big motivation there?
Well, part of it's about having more control. Right now, the U.S. has a lot of influence because of the dollar's dominance. BRICS creating an alternative, it's about shifting that balance.
Leveling the playing field.
In a sense, yes. And it's also a way for these BRICS nations to rely less on the U.S.-dominated financial system, which, let's be honest, has been a bit shaky lately.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that.
Right. Economic sanctions are being used more and more as a political tool. So having a separate system, it gives them some protection, some independence.
Okay, that makes sense. So back to the BRICS Bank for a second. We were talking about how they're funding projects, especially in developing countries. What does that look like in practice?
Sure. One concrete example is this recent project in South Africa. The BRICS Bank, they financed a big chunk of a renewable energy power plant there.
Renewable energy, that's interesting.
Right. It's not just about building bridges and roads. It's about supporting sustainable development, which is a big priority for a lot of these BRICS nations.
So it's like a different approach to development aid, maybe?
Exactly. And that brings us to another point. These traditional lenders, the IMF, the World Bank, they've often been criticized for attaching conditions to their loans.
Strings attached.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
you can have this loan, but you have to implement these specific economic policies.
Which might not always be in the best interest of the country receiving the loan.
Exactly. And that's where BRICS sees an opportunity. They're offering an alternative, a way for developing countries to access funding without feeling pressured to adopt policies that might not align with their own goals.
So it's like a different path to development, one that doesn't necessarily follow the traditional Western model.
Right. It's about having more options, more autonomy.
Got it. Okay, so we've got the bank. We've got the potential new reserve currency. The article also mentions something about a BRICS payment system. What's that all about?
So think of it as another way for BRICS to become less reliant on the West. Right now, if you want to send money internationally, it usually goes through this system called SWIFT.
SWIFT. I'm not familiar with that.
It stands for the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Basically, it's like the messaging system that connects banks around the world for these cross-border payments.
Okay, so it's how international transactions happen.
Exactly. But BRICS, they want to create their own system. They've already got some pieces in place. Russia has its own system, SPFS. China has CIPS. And they're talking about ways to link these systems together.
So they could bypass SWIFT entirely?
Potentially, yeah.
Well,
It's a long-term goal, but it's definitely on their radar.
wow, that's a pretty big deal. It's like they're really trying to build their own separate financial universe.
They are. And whether they succeed or not, it's a sign of how determined they are to reshape the global order.
So, taking a step back, looking at the big picture here, is this new world order that BRICS is aiming for, is it actually possible? Or are we getting ahead of ourselves?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to explore next.
So it sounds like BRICS has big plans, a new bank, a payment system, even their own reserve currency. That's a lot. But can they actually make it happen? Is this BRICS-powered world really possible?
Well, predicting the future is tricky business, right? But there's no denying things are changing. BRICS is a sign of that, a shift toward a world with multiple power centers.
A multipolar world, like you were saying earlier.
Exactly. Now, whether that leads to more balance, more equality, that's still up in the air. One thing to remember is BRICS. It's not this, perfectly unified group.
Right, they're not all joined at the hip or anything.
Yeah, each of those nations, they've got their own thing going on, their own internal dynamics, their own interests. Sometimes those interests even clash.
Which makes working together interesting, to say the least. So, given all that, what are the biggest obstacles in their way? What could trip them up?
One of the biggest hurdles, getting everyone on the same page. Like we were saying, lots of diversity within BRICS, but that can also lead to friction.
Right. Different priorities, different approaches.
Exactly. And then there are the existing tensions. Take
Mhm.
India and China, for example.
Two major players in BRICS.
Right. But they've also got this long-running border dispute and their geopolitical goals, not always aligned.
So how do they manage those internal disagreements while trying to present a united front to the rest of the world?
Million-dollar question. It's a delicate balancing act, for sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of the rest of the world, we can't forget about the West.
What about them? They're just going to sit back and watch all this happen.
Doubtful. The U.S. especially, they've got a lot riding on maintaining their global dominance.
So BRICS might be pushing for change, but there's going to be resistance.
Oh, absolutely. We can expect pushback, economic pressure, maybe new alliances, attempts to sow discord within BRICS.
Wow, it sounds like things could get pretty intense.
Could be. How BRICS navigates those challenges, that'll determine if they can really reshape the world order.
Definitely a lot to keep an eye on. So for our listeners who are still with us, trying to make sense of all this, what are the key takeaways? Why does all this BRICS stuff even matter?
The biggest takeaway, the world is changing. BRICS is a symptom of that. It's a sign that power isn't as concentrated as it used to be.
Even if their plans don't pan out, the fact that they're trying is a really big deal.
Exactly. And that has implications for everything. Trade, finance, international relations. It's all in flux.
So pay attention. What might seem like just another acronym today could be shaping your future tomorrow. And on that note, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of BRICS. We'll be keeping a close eye on how this all unfolds, but for now, thanks for exploring with us.